So what welcome to Burn the Ship podcast. This podcast was started as a baby of COVID.
Okay.
So my reps in the credit card processing game and electronic transactions, which you're familiar with electronic transactions now, because we're going to get to your business in a second. But we got all of our business on knocking on doors, cold calling, B2B, and networking. So it was all face-to-face interactions to a sale.
Yep.
We didn't bang phones out. We push marketing in the merchant services world is nil to none.
Right.
You're not sending emails out and getting business. It's just not happening.
That's fair.
Square did a really good job with that, but they were going after a way different market than we wanted.
Right.
Right. They were more the smaller market that no credit card processor wanted at the time.
Right. People on the foot, right?
We didn't. I don't want a $5,000 a month guy.
Right.
But they'll take 400,000 of those guys, and they did a really good job doing that.
That's fair.
So we had to come up with a way to meet people. So we had a box of gear for podcasts, and I'm talking about, 2 microphones, a very small soundboard, and a couple of headphones. And the box probably was worth, I don't know, $75. It wasn't worth much.
Yeah.
He had gotten it, I think, for $50 from a friend that started doing a podcast, right? And he brought it in, and we this was before COVID. We were messing around with it a little bit, and I was like, that'd be fun to do, And so 2 things came to the table. One was, but reverse a little bit. We were at the last NBA game at Hawks when the NBA, Adam Silver came and said, we're suspending the year.
Yeah.
And that's really the first domino of all this that's happened in COVID, if you remember.
Yep.
It was the NBA, which is wild that the NBA started a trend of, should be our government, but it wasn't. So anyways, we come back on that Monday, and I said, look, this is real. It's really going to happen. So you guys can go home if you feel unsafe. Here's your syllabus if you want to go home. Here's what you have to do to continue working here if you want to go home. I'll be here tomorrow, and I'll be here the rest of the days. So if you want to come in. So all my sales guys kept coming in.
Right.
So we're in this whole complex. We're the only people that are here. We're playing cornhole and have grills outside in the parking lot. Nobody's here. We're partying, son.
Right.
And we build a podcast room over. We had just moved over here. We build a podcast room that looked, not even close to this, but and we were inviting businesses in to do podcast. They weren't at home. They were doing nothing.
Right.
Most people weren't as scared as some people like to think. And they're like, man, I'm bored. I want to come and do it. We were doing 2 to 3 podcasts per day, and we were signing them up afterwards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was a birth of
it's a great
of
marketing
COVID.
ploy, yeah.
Yeah, so we were giving them the podcast was free. We were giving them edited version, spitting them out, and then they went into the pipeline.
Okay.
Right after. So it kind of like you.
Right.
You'll go right into the pipeline with me or somebody else. If you own a floral company and I invite you in, you're in my pipeline.
Makes sense.
And then we're following it down the road, right?
Yep.
We found out that it wasn't an invasive way to sell.
Right.
Because they left here, they got up after this, they were happy. They talked about their business. They'd never been on a podcast. 9 out of 10 of them never even done a podcast.
Sure.
So they were happy. They're like, this is cool. I like this. And then they're like, yeah, I'll do credit card processing.
Right.
Not a lot of no's.
Right.
Man. We got a lot of
huge.
yeses.
And nobody was selling then, right?
No.
Like it was hard to sell during COVID.
We broke sales records May, June, July, and August.
That's awesome.
It was wild. And good margin ones too.
Right.
So that's where it was. That's where the Burn the Ship was born.
Okay.
And we just kept doing it afterwards because it's a good technique.
Yeah.
Look, we can send out 2,000 emails for credit card processing, 100,000 emails for credit card processing, and get 0 responses.
Right.
We send 2,000 podcasts. Come do a free podcast. We get 20 calls.
That's awesome. Yeah, pretty good return rate.
Yeah. So I'll do a podcast. You know what I mean? So it was it was a great way to meet people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't we're not hard selling anybody.
Sure.
At all.
Right.
Where when we were out in the streets, we're trying to hard sell folks because it's a hard thing to sell, as you know now. It's not the easy thing to sell. So we have Adam and Keith from Blue Pigeon in. They're in the electronic transactions business, but in a specific vertical. So I'm going to let you take over and explain this new emerging vertical that's coming into our world.
So I'm one of the rare executives in payments that didn't grow up in payments at all. I'm a logistics guy through and through. I was a trucking guy, wholesale, warehousing, wholesale, the whole 9 yards. My father was a terminal manager. I grew up on the dock. I mean, he worked 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. So if you wanted to see him early in the years, you went to the dock. And so, of course, I swore I'd never be in logistics. And then, I wanted to be an investment banker in New York. And I graduated college in 2008. And that was like the worst time in America to be trying to be an investment banker or live in New York, either one really. So then I went into warehousing, because that was something I knew. Yeah. I'd worked at his warehouse and worked at at the firm for a while, and he'd become an entrepreneur in '97. Small business. Sure. So then I was an only child, so we kind of as a family we were an entrepreneur family. I think some people just don't realize that the kids are in it too.
Yeah, of course.
We used to eat out, and then he wanted to start a business, and we didn't eat out anymore. There was nothing wrong with that. It was just kind of different from growing up from before, and so I did that for a while. And part of my journey in logistics was to pay a ton of freight payment bills. Right, on behalf of shippers, manufacturers, whatever. And I was specializing in LTL freight, Old Dominion, FedEx freight, UPS freight, those guys. And so, my CFO comes to me one day and he's like, I think we can make money by paying these bills with credit card. And I'm like, well, okay. Sure. I was like, I'll open a credit card right now. No idea what I'm doing, right? So I go on there online and, get an Amex. Definitely tied it to my Social Security number. Come to find out 8 years later, my credit score is, not great. Go to buy my first house, and I'm like, I've always paid off my bills. Why is my credit score so bad? When the Amex was like, well, you ran up huge bills all the time. Right. You must have been running a business through your personal credit card. I was like, okay, well, learn and move on. Yep. But the credit card processing of this type of like transaction count was through the roof. And in 2016, 2017, it wasn't a good technology system to be able to consume that, right? And we didn't need the credit. So that was the other problem, is we didn't need the $100,000 cap. Mm-hmm. We're running through, $1 million a week. Sure. So we needed something uncappable with good funds. That's right. Right? So essentially we needed something different, just a different vehicle. Yeah.
Which your credit was bad because the credit limit was, you were using most of your credit limit. It wasn't wasn't about paying it off. Correct. It was about, I paid it off, but if you would have let it sit and wait another month, it would have been, $870.
It would have been amazing. Except for I was just banging the ceiling on $100,000 all the time. Right. Because I'm trying to get it cleared off. And it takes 48 hours to clear it off sometimes. Sure. And the things. And so we end up growing that business. And when we sell that business to a private equity, our largest client was cash rebate from paying these bills. And also what we were able to do was go out to the mass market and sell free freight payment and audit, which didn't exist. Yeah. Typical take was like 2%. Sure. So we wanted to get more clients. And that gave us more data, more back end. We were doing contract negotiations, so it gave us more clients, similar to like a podcast, right? We got access to more things with that client. Sure. And so I can remember the day we're selling this business. It's late 2018. I'm on the final doorstep. I go to the CFO of the acquiring company. I'm like, look, I want to scale this piece. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, there's zero chance that we're going to do this the day after we buy y'all. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, this is way too cumbersome. The bank recs are through the roof. We had this large rock, low rock, small ticket or large ticket item issue.
You're wanting to scale it. They're like, we're not doing it at all.
Like, we're going to kill it immediately. Yeah. And I was like, what? So I was like, well, walk me through. And when he did, I was like, okay, that makes total sense. We were a $50 million business. They were a $250 million business. They wanted to go to $1 billion. They can't be messing around with bank recs at $5,000. Sure. Because we had built a technology, basically an algorithm in Excel through VBA that would cut up these unique identifier numbers at $100 a piece, and we would we would pay under $6,800.
Sure.
So like we're maximizing the effort, to the nth degree. So I'm like distraught, and I remember I'm like, I just sold my business. I've like lost my identity, right? Again, as a sports player for most of my life, I've already lost my identity once.
Yeah.
And so I'm losing it again, and I'm losing control of the business. This guy tells me my baby's ugly.
Yep.
And I'm like, I kind of agree with him, and I hate to be like that, but I try to be 360. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to
Not only is the baby ugly, we're going to kill it.
We're killing it.
We're killing it.
We're killing it right out the gate.
Yeah.
And I didn't, and I'm thinking, I'm doing the math in my head. We're making 2% cash rebate on every dollar spent. 50% of the vendors take full card.
Sure.
So I'm like doing the math. I'm like in their financials doing the math. I'm like, we're going to make 25 million EBITDA like that.
Yeah.
We're going to double the size of the company. He's like, we're not going to do it at all. I'm like, to me, still looking back on it, still worth the effort. We should have at least tried.
Sure.
Could have built a whole department around it.
Right.
But either way, so I go out and I have a good buddy that sold a company, a large payments company. And I call him. I'm like, he's on the acquiring side. And it was a company called Paymetric. And so he sells Paymetric and he becomes the CEO of WorldPay, which becomes a massive conglomerate.
Yep.
And I'm asking him, like, there's got to be a guy. And he's like, well, I think another mutual buddy of ours, he's like, I think he knows more about this space.
Sure.
So I reach out to my bud, and he's like, let's go to lunch with this guy, Steve. And I'm like, perfect.
Do it.
This is like January 2019. And, or maybe it was spring. Either way, it's 2019. And so I go meet with Steve Boyer, who is a career payments guy. This guy has been doing payments for forever. He's worked in Galileo. He's worked at all of this, he was actually, what I find the most interesting about Steve, he and one of his business partners created the gift card. The gift card that we know today, where you go to Target and you want to buy a gift card, they created the technology that builds that gift card, right? Called Wildcard Systems.
Yep.
They ended up selling that business, and Steve is, retired, but wants to become a first-time entrepreneur. And I'm like, I love this guy already.
Yep.
He's 60 plus. He's trying to dive into this thing and he's been peppered with questions from people since he's been retired. Yep. Hey, when are we going to solve B2B payments digitally?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist, right? The technology's out there at some of the big publicly traded companies, but it's not being leveraged to the small guy, right? Like fuel cards are being used and like things like massive trucking and logistics pieces, but there's not.
I think
like
the best
small
way
stuff.
the best way to understand this in layman's terms is with people that maybe are lost in this is Delta Sky Miles.
Exactly.
It's like the easiest way to people. I'm like, you can buy.
That's right.
With your Delta Sky Miles, you can buy a grill.
Exactly.
If you want to,
like
you
rewards points.
100%.
Totally.
And they probably invented the space, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that was where it started. And I think where we are going to morph to and where it is currently is, if you could buy things with credit card in your consumer life, you should be able to use the same technology rails to do it in your business life.
No doubt.
Right? Forget the fact that the TAM's 5 times larger. Forget the fact that, our only 2 methodologies of payment are printed check and ACH because wire's not real, right? Like you use wire for commercial real estate transactions. You don't use it to pay your landscape vendor.
Trust things typically. Yeah.
Exactly. Well,
legally they use them, for sure.
It's like, I think it's 10 basis points of the total business transactions are wire, right? It's nothing.
Yeah.
Most of it's ACH.
Sure.
And
so a lot of people get ACH and wire mixed up too.
They think it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's
not the same thing.
Different rails altogether.
Exactly. And so Steve's convincing me that he's got a platform that he started, and the reason he started it was because he had to build the technology from scratch. And I'm like, in my head, I remember just sitting at that table, I'm like, there's got to be a better way, right? And then he starts walking me through the economics. And I'm like, I like the guy who's trying to start a business with a profitable waterfall right out the gate.
Sure.
And he says, we have to build the technology from scratch because otherwise we're going to license it, and then we're at the behest of the big behemoths. And as soon as you get big and they want to take an increase on you, you're out.
That's right.
Right? And if we want to be competitive,
because they're jealous and they want this. They want the whole thing.
Exactly. They don't want to play in the space with you. Okay. So he goes off to embark on this. I'm going to build this technology from scratch. And I loved it. Cut him a check on the spot. I become a board member and investor right out the gate. And so Blue Penguin was kind of this beginning of B2B payments was just not there digitally, right? ACH was kind of the only thing that was operative there. Vendors weren't requiring businesses to pay them with cards yet, which starts to happen over the 4-year spell that we're building this technology. We talked about like Ticketmaster and Amazon, and some of these businesses force you to pay card. Facebook, Google, and so
now it's become face to face. Like you can't go to Mercedes-Benz and pay cash.
Totally.
It's all card.
COVID just accelerated what we were doing. We were almost right time, right place in general. Because in 2019, it wasn't as big of a deal. And then COVID hits, and now everything's got to go digital.
Sure.
When you think about another piece of that COVID era that got saved, QR code. The QR code was dead.
It did get saved. It got accelerated.
Now it's like a thing.
Well, you remember that year in the Super Bowl commercials? Every commercial had a QR code on the thing. They didn't do that this year, which is wild to me because I bet that did pretty well last year.
I like it.
But me too.
I like that. I like getting access to a bunch of information from my phone. I'm already on it. And I think the restaurants went to it during COVID because it was hands-free and, all this stuff. And so that's what I loved Steve's beginning vision of the business model, which was, I think if we build it, they will come.
Sure.
And flash forward 5 years, and I'll say the same thing that every business says, but I've seen enough businesses to we're one of the fastest growing fintech companies in this space because we do own that technology now,
right.
And we do own enough of that interchange to be able to make it meaningful for our clients, also making profitable deals,
right.
And so we don't go out, right? And our competitors go out. They go out of spaces. Their banks go out. They take their bank down. You read about this Synapse stuff. There's like these businesses that happen.
The issue with that I see in my world, because I understand that is underwriters can tell you no.
Correct. That's right.
So if I go, hey, I want to do this, well, it's not my tech. Well, they can just say no. We don't want that deal.
That's right.
And that's where you guys are. You don't have to do that.
Correct.
You make your own decisions there.
The two greatest things about the B2B space that I think is we didn't commingle credit with it. And I don't think that, we weren't going to be the best credit provider anyways. And we didn't want to outsource to a partner to make that have to be part of our pitch and sell.
Sure.
So we just went all good funds. And we went good funds because we can offer more cash rebate, right? We have more interchange stack that we own, so we can offer you a more lucrative deal. And you are paying accounts payable that you're doing ACH or check with anyway.
Sure.
Those are already good funds.
That's right.
There's no credit there. And you can keep your credit on your credit card, right? You can keep doing your Amex points, and you can do if you want to do that, keep doing that. That's not the business that we're after.
You're not taking it away anyways.
Exactly. We want to streamline accounts payable from the sense of, I think that if you're reading right now and you've been either attacked by ransomware, or you have seen your buddy's business be attacked by ransomware, or we had clients that went down weekly, and they're after those bank account numbers stored on Sally Sue's desktop. Jeez. And that's wild to think about that's where we are in this day and age.
But they're all over the place.
They're all over the place. Nobody's got a training on how to collect a bank account number to be able to pay a vendor. Right?
So wild in the credit card processing space. It was just like, they're always like, especially in the early 2000s, like, it's against Visa, MasterCard, they're going to fine you. And that never was a thing.
Right.
But then it started being a thing.
Right.
Because people...
Is that the whole, like, if you
the PCI compliance
under
stuff.
$10 and, that kind of thing? Like, I used to see when I go to...
No, but it's exactly what you said, that Sally has it on an Excel spreadsheet. Their thing gets broken into, it gets done, or they're using a software that is not encrypted.
Right.
Or, Square was... They didn't have an encrypted reader on that thing.
Okay.
And people got hacked all the time with Square at first. It was not an encrypted reader, so those numbers were just in the air. People were just capturing them, So that is against PCI regs.
Right.
So you would get fined if you're a merchant doing that.
Okay.
And it's not your tech anyway, but you still are held liable for that.
That's wild.
So there's a restaurant. A Mexican restaurant that got hacked. I think we talked about this a little bit when we first talked when we had lunch. But I woke up my wife at like 12 o'clock at night, and I was like, "That's that restaurant that's right around the corner." And she was like, okay. And I'm like, I'm going to go talk to them tomorrow. And she's like, they are not going to want to talk to you, Jay. I was like, they don't have a choice. So I'm going tomorrow. Because whatever software they were using, somebody broke into it.
Yep.
And stole, I think it was like 60,000 credit card numbers out of it, something like that.
Wow.
And they got fined.
Yeah.
So first person I ever seen to really got fined.
That's crazy.
So, and then I heard a lot of it too. So
Right.
yeah, so the technology people are using, because some of these businesses are mom and pop family businesses
Totally.
that might be doing $3, $4, $5 million, and it's a great business, but they're still not technology savvy.
It's just everywhere. I was with a community bank not too long ago, and the president was telling me that a neighboring community bank down the road wrote off $100 million in a quarter on printed check fraud. I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's wild.
And he was like, well, they think that the USPS employees are just selling the keys
Yeah.
to the PO boxes. I'm like, well, that's an easy thing to do. It makes sense. I
Very
can't believe
easy.
you can steal that much money
can.
from businesses, and there's insurance that protects it. And
If you got
these
a
things.
routing number and an account number,
Totally.
are you serious?
do whatever you want.
You can do a lot of stuff, man.
Exactly.
And as long as they have a way to get those funds where they want them, you're going to get taken.
So, but to basically say to the business owners that you guys had a better option, it didn't exist, right?
Sure.
And that was the key piece that I like when I enter businesses is like, are we solving something that wasn't here before, or are we just trying to better what's already here? Either one is fine.
Yeah, that's right.
I just want to understand kind of where we are, and Blue Penguin's one of those rare cases where we're getting to solve a problem for small businesses and medium businesses that the technology didn't exist. And so you weren't able to do digital copies of payments to your vendors. Now you can. And they'll say, well, we can't do it because we have a great relationship with this vendor. It's a 20-year relationship, and we don't want to charge them full interchange.
Yeah.
That's expensive.
Sure.
It's like factoring rates. And I'm like, I totally get that. So when I went back to the product team and the tech team originally, I was like, we can sell any business that's selling into vendors that are accepting card, Ticketmaster or whatever, right now. Like that's great. We can do that.
Because it can be a go no go in a small margin deal.
Absolutely. Oh, you might just not want to call your vendor and say, hey, by the way, I'm paying you differently and you're taking a 2.5% haircut.
Yeah.
So that might just not be a conversation you want to do. Or your
you
vendor,
can't do.
or reality is like the vendor is McMastercar,
Sure.
and you don't have the leverage to do that in the first place.
Right.
So I think, but there are tons of businesses out there that are paying tens of thousands of transactions a month, and they're having to do it via ACH, and they've got this giant department, and they don't have the right levels of security, and they're not encrypting the bank account numbers,
Sure.
and they're not leveraging the proper platform, and so they're opening themselves up for risk, and all they're really trying to do is pay their vendors the right way.
Yeah, and they're trying to get cash flow back.
Right.
The cash flow is huge for business, especially in the construction industry.
Exactly.
And then you're getting that cash flow back.
Exactly. And you got things that the construction industry has. Every industry has its own little niche point, but in construction, there's a lien waiver system, right? So until a sub can get paid, the GC has to sign off that the lien has been moved off
Sure.
of that, right? Hey, you're done with this project. You can get paid now.
Right.
That kind of stuff can be encrypted digitally, right? So as a payment, as a lien waiver is then signed by DocuSign, that it immediately creates a card, and then that payment goes out, right? So I think we see the future. Back to my point before is, okay, so you don't want to have this conversation with your vendor and tell them how expensive it is. Well, then we need to create a different product.
Sure.
So I go back to the product and tech team, and our chief product officer, Jake Sterling, amazing guy, wealth of knowledge, has been around the block, right? First data, all the way down. And he was like, well, I think we can create a product where we can manipulate the interchange cost, the cost of burden,
Sure.
to the vendor. Doesn't exist, right? You can't do that anywhere else. I'm like, well, then that sounds arduous, right? Like that seems
Sure.
like a large task. He's like, we have good ideas on how to do this. So we have created a custom interchange platform where.
But you created it because you created the interchange itself, because there is no
Exactly.
interchange there.
Back to Steve's original point, he didn't. I don't think he knew. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't.
But
know
if
the
you own the
future.
technology,
Yeah.
if you're doing that, there's a cost to that internally.
Totally.
But there's no overlording association or bank that's telling you have to pay this
That's
because there's no interchange. You are creating the interchange.
Exactly. And so
You don't even have to call it interchange.
we call it whatever we want, right? Yeah, variable rate.
That's right.
Right.
You don't even have to call it that because it's really not that.
Exactly. And so I think, and this already existed in the sense that large conglomerates started in the 80s with Bell South and whatever the other conglomerate was that became AT&T, right? And so what the government... Southern Bell. And so the government comes to them and says, look, we can't process the amount of checks, right? The roommate era had started. We got 4 people in a house. They all cut separate checks. And then now you pay your water bill, your telecom bill, your energy bill, right? They're like, we want you to take credit card. And they're like, well, we don't want to take credit cards. It's expensive.
Cost us, yeah.
And so
especially back then.
So they rewrite the interchange to $1.50.
Yeah.
And if you're a utility today, you can still only get charged $1.50.
Sure.
For this transaction. And so that was kind of the beginning
That's if they
of
know
that.
about it.
It's if they know about it, right? And there's ways around it. As you know, technology has grown up. But I think that's the future for American businesses, $10 million businesses, $20 million businesses. I want to click a button and I want to send safe and secure methods of payments to all my vendors, and I don't want to charge them an arm and a leg to do that.
Right.
There's a cost to do business.
Sure.
I totally get that. But 2.5% is different than 45 basis points. Right? Like that's a completely
Depending
different
on the average
ball
ticket.
game. Exactly. And your average ticket in those vendors is going to be $1,000, you know? So like somebody pay $4 to get a safe and secure payment, typically faster. Even if it's just not the 24-hour lag for ACH, like it's still right now.
Sure.
And that's where I think, so that's the first piece of what we're working on. The second piece is your business, which is, well, okay, now then that means every single vendor across the entire ecosystem has to be stood up as a card acquiring.
Sure.
And that's not true either, right? I don't know what the exact stat is of how many are and how many aren't. But when we run analysis for most businesses, I'd say it falls anywhere from 85 to 95% cardability. So there's still 5 to 15% of most businesses that don't accept cards because they just don't. They've never had the need to accept a card for payment.
Yeah. It's just there's certain verticals that just don't take cards still, especially in the B2B world, because it's not advantageous to them to do it.
Totally agree. Or no one's trying to pay them.
I mean, you're talking about. So we have a company that does that is a huge asphalt company.
Okay.
And their tickets are $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000.
Right.
20,000 is a low ticket for them.
Okay.
Well, now with level 3 data and there's a different interchange for that.
Yep.
It's a large transaction fee, $150 transaction fee, and then very, very low on the percentage.
Right,
you know what I mean? So
right.
there's a different interchange for that now. Interchange was, it was one page when I first started. Now it's a lot of pages. It's not. In 1999, that would have been so much money for them to take a card for $100,000.
Totally.
It's crazy amounts.
I mean, it wouldn't have been doable, right?
No, because it would have taken too much of their margin out of it. It just wouldn't. It couldn't have been. It couldn't. You couldn't do it.
Right.
You had to do wires or ACHs.
Right.
And the people paying were used to that too.
Exactly. And so you think about like where we are with ACH, right? Which I love to talk about ACH because no one owns ACH, right? Like it's not like an individual company I'm competing against. It's just a methodology.
Yep.
And it has its
process.
place. It'll have its place. It'll have its place for here until the end of time. But I don't think that ACH transfers for business transactions is the safest and best way when the largest growing industry sector is ransomware as a service.
Sure.
Right? Like we can't hide from this anymore. Right? The data, I mean, when Equifax got hit, everybody was on alert, right? And so you just saw this.
There's a lot of big. Sony got hit.
Right, Target.
Sony got hit. So it's not small businesses anymore. I mean, it's huge businesses that have major
data.
amounts of money in tech security.
Totally agree.
I mean, they're paying millions of dollars in payroll for people that are on their payroll to do it. So, the people that are still in there are sophisticated too.
I liken the hacker community to the steroid community of the 90s and 2000s
that's
in
right.
baseball, right? Like everybody's like, well, we're just going to start testing. I'm like, they're just going to get better. Like they're just going to get better steroids, like more undetectable steroids. It's not. You're not going to. They're
We'll
never
call it
going to
HGH now.
Yeah, we're never
We're
going
just
to
gonna call it
this.
HGH.
Yeah. They're always going to be a step ahead.
Yeah.
And the hackers are a step ahead.
It doesn't matter what they're taking as long as they're getting bigger, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And everybody loved the home runs, and it was okay. It was a good era. But I think now the technology can exist, and I think American businesses to get on the forefront of that, if there is a nominal amount of cost that them and the vendor can get on the same page with, but everything can be transacted digitally, we see it the same as Apple Pay for your business, right? That's that's got to be transforming you guys' business overnight, in the sense of I don't even carry my wallet anymore. Like I'm the guy. I'll hound the waiter at the restaurant. I know that I know your what do you call it? Your like central terminal. It'll take Apple Pay. So I'll just walk back there. I'll just walk back there and do it.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't though.
I mean, that's the thing. Is like, but then is it my fault that your payment methodology doesn't work in the sense like I want it to work?
That's the golden question, right? What you're coming into my establishment, this is how I get paid. You probably still need a card, but look, you break it down to the card right now, right? The card itself, and the stripe on the back of a credit card is tape recorder technology.
Right.
That's what it is. And people that are young don't even know that's what it is.
Right.
It's what you pulled out of a tape recorder that's wrapped around the thing.
Right.
It's 1960s and 70s technology. That's why the EMV came in with the chip on the card, but they're still not disappeared from American cards.
Right.
They're still there.
Absolutely.
So they still can be broken into.
Right.
It's not even really good technology to do it. You can have apps on your phone that captures that with me setting right here. You know what I mean? And people come those new wallets like, oh, this will
the RFID wallet.
Yes, right.
I got a buddy that does that.
So if you're issuing cards, and the issuers are issuing that, you're still, yes, there's chips on it, but the other's still on there too.
Right.
And so not all merchants even still to this day can accept chips.
I know.
Which is wild.
Isn't that crazy?
Which is wild. Now it's down. Obviously, it's probably less than 5%.
Right.
That now that can do it, but you're talking about ACH and how old that technology is.
Right.
It is.
That's old.
And how much security has gone into that.
Correct.
Probably not a lot compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Totally.
And the people that are still in have dialed up, not down.
Exactly. And they have the newer tech.
Right.
And I'll give, my last piece of credit for Steve today is like, I think what he realized early by building the technology from scratch now is that anybody who actually owned the technology that does what we do now, it was 30 years old.
Right.
So even if he had to build it, he at least got to build it on new code. He got to build it on new platform. He got to build it on more nimble.
Sure.
He can add more modules faster. We can add more features faster, right? So you think about this today, and we were talking about this in the other room. You can spin up unlimited amounts of cards with unlimited amounts of capital and deploy them to unlimited amounts of vendors in split seconds.
Sure. Fast.
That is if you wanted to pay every single American business $1 today, you could do that now. That technology exists now.
Sure.
And that's kind of crazy to think about, like the reach that your business could have if you could do that.
Well, of course, yes. And when you're talking about security too, as if you're ACHing somebody money or you're writing a check to them, like what your business is virtual credit cards.
Correct.
So
or debit cards.
That's right.
Yeah.
But there's still, because it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, a branded card still. It still is a branded card.
Correct.
It's just it can be physical too. You will send them a card too. It can be, but there's still a sense of security in the chargeback method there. There's still arbitration done there, so you still can fight for money. Where if you ACH somebody money, that's not as
gone.
It's not there is a chargeback method there. It's just different.
Yeah.
and it's a lot. The windows A lot less.
Correct.
I think it's 30 days on an ACH, or
Right.
50, or maybe even 14 days, depending on the bank. I think they have different. Every bank has their own different rules. But when you're talking about a credit card, you have 90, 120 days to dispute that charge if something is not. If somebody's done some funny stuff.
Listen, MasterCard and Visa make their business, and American Express too, make their business on customer service.
Sure.
Right? Because they know how fast you can switch providers. And then you stay there forever. Right. And so if you dispute something at Amex, they pretty much just, they're going to research it, but they're going to trust you for a while. Right? Like
Amex for sure.
Yeah. If you do it a lot, they're going to probably trust you less, but they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
That, hey, I tried my hardest to get rid of my Netflix account.
Yeah.
And Netflix just keeps charging me. I don't want to do it
100%.
anymore, I think that's
But that's something that you haven't stated though, that all the security methods, you still have the sense of the blanket of security of the card brand protecting
absolutely
you, even though it's virtual.
Exactly. And the fact that it's virtual makes it even more secure.
Sure,
right? Because it rides on different rails, and someone doesn't take that physical card and then move it into their wallet or whatever. And then we're going to see it next, right?
Yep.
You're going to see. I think the next features that you're going to see in this marketplace is going to be T&E cards on digital wallets, right? Like I don't need to give I've got 1,000 sales reps nationwide.
Sure.
Do I want to give them all physical cards? Do I want it?
I think you do right now. You don't want to, but you have to because because like you said, you go to a restaurant and then and they don't take
They don't take it.
They don't take it.
Right.
So you have to right now. But you don't want to. I get it.
But I think the psyche
I get it.
of spending on your phone is more, right? Like I think that, especially in our generation, like we spend more on credit cards than your generation and beyond, or we're in the same generation, but like my dad's generation and on and on. I think that
what's normalized.
It's become part of the culture, right?
Sure.
And I think that I saw the other day, like 62% of all credit card transactions now are Apple Pay or Google Pay. Like of that category of digital payments.
I believe that, yeah.
And so like that's a big number.
It's huge. I don't know what the whole percentage of transactions in general are that, but I bet it's probably less than 5% total.
Yeah.
But I read an article in the Green Sheet. I don't know if do you know the Green Sheet? It's the electronic payments.
Okay.
I'll give you one. You guys probably could do some stuff in there anyways.
Green Sheet. All right.
Yeah, I'll give you a magazine on the way out. But I read an article in there one time. It's funny. I was on the way out to the Electronic Transaction Association, and I just picked it up so I could read it on the plane. And trends like Japanese culture, we kind of follow that trend in a lot of cases. Well, the digital wallet didn't do in Japan what they thought it would do. They figured out now this was 10 years ago, I think, when I read this article, so it could have changed and the numbers could have changed at all. But they found out that that in Japanese culture they liked the card. They liked the card. It didn't trend like they thought it was going to trend.
Interesting.
And then First Data came up with their digital wallet. Funny enough, they called it ISIS. And then in this this was right when ISIS was getting formed. They're like they've later changed their name to Vericard or something like that, like because of the radical Muslim, whatever. So he's like, we changed the name or whatever. But it's funny that the trends it hasn't trended like Apple Pay. Android, Google, all that hasn't trended like they thought it was going to.
Right.
I can tell you that. But as generations get older, it will.
Yep.
It will because the wearable technology is going to be the thing. It is the thing.
Totally.
In Publix, if I forget my wallet, I still use a card, but I got it on my watch and my phone.
Yep.
So I can pay for it most of the places
That's
now.
right.
Restaurants will be there very soon with pay at the table.
Yep.
The kiosk will be there at the table. A lot of restaurants have went that route. It's going to get there.
Yep.
And it's not going to take as long as I once thought it was going to.
Right. And I think the use case that we see or what we're hunting most of the time is like back to my roots in logistics. Mm-hmm. We would stand the profiling and acceptance of a new vendor or carrier to run one load that was $300. Could be 20 minutes.
Yep.
Right. You got to get a bank account number. You got to get them set up with all the paperwork and all this stuff. Well, they're never coming back.
No.
And so the soft cost inefficiency of that is through the roof.
Yes.
You got a whole department doing stuff for someone who you're never going to have a relationship with.
No.
Right? And
there's no ROI there probably.
Exactly. So what I'm thinking is like, okay, if they come back 5 times or 3 times or whatever you want to set the low bar at, then you can build a relationship with them. But until then, just say, okay, run the load and we'll just send you this virtual card and we'll be done. Right?
Yes.
It's your bank account over there. It's your thing. You got to figure out how to get it acquired and the whole 9 yards, right? It's kind of a premise on you. This is how we pay.
Right.
So we're starting to see some of that. I think, obviously, our business is taken off on the side of the vendors accepting card already.
Sure.
But breaking into the American regular businesses is going to be the long and large play.
Sure.
For something like digital payments, right?
Well, digital payments, and because it doesn't matter if it's digital payments, because if it's on a watch, it doesn't matter if it's a card, or it doesn't matter if you have something, new glasses. When you blink, you make a payment. The transaction happens no matter what.
Right.
So, and that's truly digital payments still.
Correct.
Right. So, the issue is that restaurant that doesn't have that hardware, and that's what we see because we're on the ground floor with these merchants. So
Correct.
It's hard to get anybody to change the way they're doing things right now.
Right.
And there's cost to that in hardware.
Yeah.
So it's working right now. Why do I need this? Well, you need it because, our thing is you're going to make more money if you do it.
Right.
Somebody's going to be jogging by your coffee shop. They don't have their wallet and they got their watch.
One more sale.
That's a sell.
One more sell.
That's a sell. And we're talking about a drop in the bucket to this piece of hardware. The good thing is hardware has actually gone down in cost.
Right.
Over the last 15
more volume,
years.
Sure.
Well, I mean the hardware's cheaper.
Right.
It's cheaper.
Just in general,
it's cheaper because it's smaller. It's
Right.
not as bulky, and the machine companies don't make near as what they used to. And leases are kind of done with small
Right.
equipment now. It used to be a big thing. So it's really changing the mindset of the merchant. I think that in y'all's industry and y'all's vertical might be a little bit easier because they're bigger companies right now.
Right.
Even when you're talking about smaller person, they're still doing, $3, $4, $5 million.
That's right.
Dollars.
Accounts payable.
That's
numbers, right?
So, which is, the average merchant probably does, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not $1 million business.
Totally
So
agree.
that $2,000 that sink in technology is a lot more for them, a lot more cumbersome.
And I think that's the beauty of as we've continued to grow.
But that's not your client anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you go back to my original use case, right? I wanted to pay a bunch of bills and I wanted to make the same cash rebate. Like if Blue Penguin in its current day form had existed back then, I not only would have not had, $250,000 in extra OpEx for just doing bank recs.
Sure.
Right. I would have been, we avoid large ticket. So like that would have been done. I could deploy I could deploy a card per vendor if I wanted to. I can do reloadable. I can do single use, ghost cards, the whole 9 yards. But put all that aside, because I was doing it anyways.
Yep.
I could have scaled it at what ended up being $1.25 billion business. Then now it's $2 billion.
Sure.
I mean, it's an enormous amount of upscale selling that I could have had for a business when I was trying to sell that business in the first place.
That's right.
So creating value for a buyer is the number one game in selling your business, right?
Of course.
And so that's what I wanted to do. And I thought I had that, tiger by the tail.
Yeah, but you're so lucky. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Like you're so lucky that guy killed your baby.
I know.
Think about it.
Miserable.
Think about it, because here's the deal. Because you would have been going, your whole business would have been acquiring
Right.
clients for another piece of technology.
Correct.
That's it.
I agree.
And then they own
Yep.
those clients because they own the technology.
Well, I wouldn't be at Blue Penguin, right?
No.
I would have never invested. I would have been like, what's the point? I've already got this thing figured out.
That's right. But
Yeah.
but the thing is one day, like Steve said, First Data wants this for this now.
Right.
Because they know what the worth is.
Right, exactly.
They know what the worth is now, and they're just going to squash you, or you're just going to give up some of your margin.
Right.
Or whatever that is.
Right.
Or you're going to sell to them.
That's right.
At really dimes on the dollar.
Right.
So you're kind of lucky that he killed your baby.
We went back to.
I think it's
agree.
very fortuitous, actually.
I mean, we talked about linear time earlier, right?
Yeah.
Good and bad. Like it seemed bad at
Yes.
the moment, but you're right. You're making a good picture. Like I mean, that was what. Yeah, that was 7 years ago. Like good. I'm glad it happened.
Because
you know?
you would have built this whole business that they're like, yeah, I get it. I see the vision.
Yeah.
I understand this. And I can see 25 million or whatever going through. But you're still at the behest of the technology that you're renting.
That's right. And I love that we've been able to be involved in a business that doesn't have that constraint. Now it brings other constraints, right? Like I'm not the greatest, IT management guy.
Right.
I'm having to learn a lot about product.
Sure.
And how to build technology and I don't do any of that. I mean, we have a phenomenal team that does that, but I still think learning the entirety of the business is always the key.
Yep.
And so I've had to see the hardships of like, and honestly, MasterCard and Visa are really good to work with, which
Sure.
they don't have to be.
No, they don't. I've always liked. They're not bad.
No,
like they're
I mean,
not. They're good
for
with
how
their,
big they are.
Yeah, and they're good with their clients. I mean, it doesn't hurt. They get, 13 basis points off everything it's ever ran in interchange.
Hey, well worth it for white glove.
God almighty.
I know. You see the breakdown of what they make.
Freaking man, when that's went up a lot over the years. But I remember when they added 2 pennies.
Yeah.
And people were freaking out. I'm like, it's the customer's going to pay it. What
Right.
are we talking about? And at the end of the day, the business is going to pay it, and then at the end of the day, after that, the consumer's going to pay it. So the businesses that are not as well seasoned are going to absorb that, and they shouldn't absorb it.
Right.
They should put it in the cookie that they're baking, like business since when business existed.
Right.
Your cost is this. If your cost goes up, your price is this. Now it's really not that hard.
Yeah. I totally agree.
It's really not that hard. You just got to break it down, like you said, the ice cream cone.
Well, maybe the inflation talk that everybody is kind of listening to now. Maybe that'll help people in business.
I've never actually. I was talking about this with my buddies in construction. Actually, was talking about your business with him, but inflation was like, to me, my whole life was like gravity.
It's just around.
It's just around. You were told it exists.
Yeah.
You can see it because your dad spent $5 to get in a movie.
Right.
In 1980, and
now it's
$25. So you saw it, but we're talking about a 30-year span.
Right.
In 4 years, I've actually seen inflation at its worst, really. But you could see it now.
Well, in trucking, we used to sell against the $8 eggs, right? Like that was the actual, infographic that we used in Dex, which was like, we got a problem with trucking.
Milk and eggs.
If milk and eggs, and if eggs hit $8, you got a real problem. It was facetious.
Yes.
Like we're like, nowhere in history will this ever be $8. You know what I buy every single week at Whole Foods? $8 eggs.
That's sure.
I couldn't buy enough of them. Like I buy more eggs at $8.
They're great.
Because they're good eggs.
Yeah.
And but I think you're seeing this conglomerate of like consolidation, right, across most businesses that gives it and verticalizes most things. Mm-hmm. And I love following like the Koch brothers story, right? Where they took their dad's business from something small relatively, right, 27 million in 1964 or whatever, like relatively small. But
those guys never missed a mill.
No, both the brothers are worth $100 billion.
Yeah.
So like, okay, so small to big, right?
Yeah.
And they verticalized everything.
Sure.
They wanted the tree, they wanted the mill. They wanted the paper, the papyrus. They wanted the whole 9 yards all the way up, right? And so I always find that interesting that the consumer ends up bearing that brunt most of the time when when everything is verticalized.
They have to.
Who else is going to pay for it?
They have to. It's just kind of the ABCs, man.
Right.
At the end of the day, the consumer's gonna take the hit.
I think it'll be interesting this next chapter to see if so everything got more expensive. It typically doesn't come back down that much.
No.
So are we at the new era where this is just, you just got to make more? Because that might just be where we are.
Like in a lot of the Asian countries, they're like, this is 30,000 whatever yen or ruples. That's inflation in their country, right? Because at one point it was 1 yen or 1 this or 1 that, whatever their currency is. So it will eventually get there for us that the 8 eggs are 20,000.
guess
dollars.
So. I guess so.
Well, it definitely will.
Yeah.
It definitely will.
Yeah.
It's just
The dollar won't be worth what it is now.
yeah, but we're talking about comparatively speaking,
and it's not worth what it is today.
200,000 over there. So comparatively speaking, it'll be the same. As long as government stays a little stable. We'll see what happens. Get rich, make a lot of sales, guys.
Yeah.
The ship's going down.
Need more. Yeah.
Make some sales.
Right.
Guys, we really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in. We'll do a part 2 of one of these and dig more into it and into Blue Pigeon. But we're excited about having you guys.
This is awesome.
Excited about doing.
Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely, man.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
Great to be with you.
Burn the ship. Everybody, be good to everybody out there.